A quote comes to mind, which was once said by a very, very wise man. I told you so! First and foremost, congratulations Pakistan. Congratulations to the public domain. Congratulations to all that made this happen. A big, big congratulations. I'm sure there are millions and millions of smiles and tears of joy around the world. What did I say? And I've been having this argument with, I'd say 95% of the people I speak to. We told you that Imran Khan's popularity had gone. A lot of his vote bank had disappeared. Were not going to vote for him again in the next general elections. Even though he steered the country away from bankruptcy. He steered the country through a pandemic. And the world recognizes his efforts and uses Pakistan as an example for the way Pakistan managed the pandemic. Or should we say, plandemic. But that's another story for another time. So the establishment or our services had enough trust in him. Because if you look at it, the economy that is going to be handed over to him now is not far off from the economy that he inherited in 2018 when he came into power. And he came into power with a crippled government, handicapped government. I've been saying this time and time and time again, because he was an outside of the box. He was not like the rest of them. So he had to be tested. So on the ground, we said this, that he'd lost a lot of his vote bank. And this is the harsh reality. We can, close our ears and close our eyes and say, no, that's not true. It is. He would, and as Mariam Nawaz once said, that you'd have to wear a helmet to come out, and eggs and tomatoes would be thrown at you. Well, it was getting very, very close to that. And again, I say this, that had he been here in government during this commodities super cycle, or what other words you call inflation, record inflation, for borrowing over the last 2 years. And this is not just Pakistan. This is a worldly affair, worldwide problem. More, and I keep saying this, more dollars were printed during these 2 years of COVID than have ever been printed in the history of the United States dollar being in existence. So this inflation, runaway inflation, is out of control, and it affects every single country in the world because we are pegged against the dollar. But again, that's another story for another day. We're going to keep it short and sweet. What else did we say? These narratives created for the then opposition to lap up like a good little puppy, to make the then opposition run to their imperial masters for backing their vote of no confidence. And we know which masters we're talking about. The foreign masters. Which narratives are we talking about? Well, let's start with the first. The whole episode, the Faiz Hamid episode. Remember, this happened shortly after the Afghanistan episode, when he turned up the day Kabul was liberated. The episode of the selection of the next chief of the intelligence services. The second was this Russia visit, where initially, obviously, we all know everybody's on board. Yet a narrative comes out, or narrative is created to say no, Imran Khan went on his own accord. The third narrative, the narrative on the air bases, contradictory statements coming out about this. IK saying absolutely not, and then there's a narrative being created that somebody is authorizing these air bases. ISPR played an amazing part in this with their constantly contradicting statements. Remember, and we've seen this again, constantly contradicting their own earlier statements. We have to remember these speeches that come out by ISBR are never freestyled like I'm doing now. This I am freestyling. These are written, checked, double checked, triple checked. Multiple sign-offs are given, and then they're brought out into the public domain. So what did ISPR do? Constantly contradicting earlier statements, and then bringing this Sazish and Mudakhalat episode back into the spin when it was more or less forgotten about. Again, contradictory statements to bring it back into the limelight. Lettergate, the famous cipher, unfortunately happened by chance, and it was caught up in the crosswinds. In Imran Khan's famous words, "Kisi ki jurat nahi hogi dobara aisa khat likhne ka." What else did we say? We said the imported government had been brought in to make these difficult decisions. Which difficult decisions are we talking about? We've already mentioned this record inflation, this runaway inflation. These decisions had to be made. And if Imran Khan had made these decisions, he would have been completely wiped out. What else did we say? We had to wait for the budget to be completed and for the IMF sign-off, which only just happened a few days back. Why is the IMF sign-off so important? It's a meager $1 billion, which is nothing in comparison to the near 38 billion our overseas Pakistanis send in annually. It is important because the rest of the bankers, namely the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and so on and so forth, as well as other countries, will not lend on favorable terms until the IMF have given a green signal. This borrowing cycle, again, is another story for another day. By the time the imported government figured out they had been trapped, it was much, much too late. Shehbaz Sharif was ready, believe it or not, to wind up before the budget. But guess what came about? His arrest news about his money laundering cases. Remember, these are open and shut cases. He should be in prison. So should his sons. So lo and behold, he fell back into line. The budget came about, incomplete, hurriedly, doctored numbers to limit the blow to their politics, but shortly thereafter a further budget was released. Then what did we say? We said things would start to wind down after the budget, after the IMF, that the government would fall by these by-elections. And again, I was arguing with individuals, even as late as yesterday, who were of the thought that these elections would be managed. Imran Khan would be given a few seats, and the imported would be given enough to manage power in Punjab, to keep their government at bay. I said, oh no, no, no. Clean sweep for Imran Khan. This is the long game. What did we say about the pawns in the mission? Being not just the politicians, but the public domain. In the words of Asad Durrani, when asked whether he is a moral man, and who is Asad Durrani? He's one of our former spy chiefs. His response: when it comes to statecraft, morality takes a back seat. Remember, in the grand scheme of things, everything is a statistic. Everything is based on probability for the greater good. Going back to the 25th of May episode, Azadi March, Imran Khan was given the information from the same masterminds about the plan by imported to face off the Rangers, face off the army against Imran Khan, and to have him sidelined once and for all by the means of Article 6, planned by the Sharifs. This again was the mass awakening of the public domain against injustice and to sling the mud on the imported government. If anybody asks me, what is Imran Khan's biggest success? I would say his biggest success is he broke the back of the electables. In the next general elections, if he was to give a ticket to a lamppost, that lamppost will win with a landslide. I mean, look at these elections. Look at the margins in the votes. Even with the major rigging, we saw, look, one example, we saw 600 votes by one presiding officer in one constituency. This was caught. People's votes being moved around. One family, one person's vote would be here, one would be there. Biryani being used, money being used, commodities being used. If we have votes by EVM, it would have been a 20 out of 20. Every single seat would have been taken by him. Now we lost 3, I would say, with the rigging. And I'm going to get to the 4th, which is PP7 Rawalpindi. Now, in my eyes, this has been managed. Now, why has this been managed? PP7 had to be managed. It's too close to home. And we know whose home we're talking about. This was the only seat that was managed. And it had to be managed. Because it's not just us looking at these results. That's right. There are foreign bodies looking at these results. And we had to give it the guise that, look, we done what we had to do. But the public domain, you cannot stand in the way of the public domain. So as I said, this is the long game. PP7 Rawalpindi has been managed. I mean, look at the difference in the votes in other constituencies. And there's not even a few hundred votes in PP7. 66 or 69,000 votes. I don't know the exact numbers. But this one has been managed. And that is to give the guise that everything is happening naturally. Even with us trying to stop him from getting the seats, he got the seats. So that is it in a nutshell. Where are we heading now? Well, I'll tell you something. First and foremost, to the public, pat yourself on the back. You've done an amazing job. But the fight is not over. You've just shown you can do it in 20 constituencies. Now we need to do it in the rest. We will give him a 2/3 majority in the general elections. This is where we're heading. So next few days or so, we're gonna see a wind up of the assemblies, because Shehbaz Sharif is just the Prime Minister of Islamabad, and Islamabad is a 2/3 majority Imran Khan. So he's the Prime Minister of nobody, in short. So we're going to see a wind down. And again, you're going to have caretaker government. And in my opinion, again, this is my opinion. I may be right, I may be wrong, but this is my analysis. There will be judges in the caretaker government. And these few things that these imported government have done, namely EVM machines, namely overseas Pakistani vote, namely the NAB changes they did to suit them and their cases, these will be reversed and look forward to a 2/3 majority. But I'll bring other news in. Also expect the return of Nawaz Sharif. He'll be fighting the next elections. So I'll leave you at that. Till the next time. Congratulations.